I've heard that there are two things in life that are certain: death and taxes. So if we know that death is a certainty, then something that's important would be a will. Hello and welcome to another episode of Set Up for Success. My name's Tracy Answer, and on this episode I am blessed to have my lovely hubby Richard Answer joining us.
Hi babes, thank you for having me.
And we are going to be talking about wills. I'm going to be questioning my husband, who knows a lot more than myself about wills, and hopefully I'm going to learn something and you're going to learn something that you didn't know before about wills. So before I go straight into my questions, I'm going to ask Richard to tell us a little bit about himself and why I've asked him to join me on today's program.
Thanks. Well, I basically run a financial education training company. I personally teach and train individuals about money, how to make more money, how to manage more money, and how to protect more money. So I'm an expert in trusts, asset protection, personal finance, and also a qualified and registered will writer. So I believe that's why Tracy's asked me to join her today to talk about wills specifically.
Thank you. So let's get straight in with the questions. And my first question is, what is a will?
Great question. A will effectively is a legal document that allows any individual over the age of 18 to have full control over where their personal assets should go in the event of a death taking place. So, for example, if you're married with children, we'll go into a bit more detail later on, then if you don't have a will, then effectively if you die, the government will say where your assets will go. So if you have a will, then you can decide where you want your assets to go and have full control over that.
Thank you. So does everyone need a will?
In my opinion, I'm going to say yes. Absolutely, without a doubt. Obviously, you need to be over the age of 18 to legally be entitled to write a will. And probably if you're very young listening to this, you're probably thinking, why on earth do I need a will? I don't have anything, which is fair enough. But as the stages of life starts to take place, for example, you may be in a relationship which is serious, you may be living with somebody for a long period of time, you may have children, you may be in a marriage, you may be divorcing, separating, you may have purchased a house or home for the first time. Lots of life events will take place, and as you develop in life, as you progress in your stages of life, you will accumulate more assets, and ultimately you want to have a say as to who gets those and where it goes. And the other thing which is really important in all communities is upon death, the funeral. Okay, a lot of people may not think about the cost of a funeral. It's actually very expensive. Just for a plot of land for burial is around about £6,000 or £7,000. So who's going to pay for that once you pass away? So if that's planned in advance, normally it's a lot cheaper. Number two, it eliminates the stress and keeps the family in these horrible times of grief and just recuperating, able to not worry about those things because it's all taken care of. So a will is vital, and I think everyone needs a will at some stage, sooner rather than later.
Thank you. So what happens if someone dies without a will?
So that's actually not a very good situation to be in, because literally the government will decide. It's called dying intestate, and so they will decide who the personal representatives will be. If you have children, obviously they will decide who the guardians will be, if the father's around or the mother's not around, or etc. If you have assets, they will determine who will get them, and that you may think that's not a big deal. However, it can get very complicated, especially if in situations where there are children or other stepchildren involved, or other scenarios with regards to property, family, where you do you really want the government to determine where your assets go and who they go to? And it's not necessarily favourable in all circumstances, so it's better to have full control so you know what you're doing.
Okay. So, if you don't have any assets, do you still need a will?
Well, it depends on what you class as assets. You might have your favourite car, BMW, I don't know, I just an example, or your favourite dress that you bought from Harrods when you were 21. It may not be valuable to anybody else, but it's valuable to you. You can assign that. You can gift that to someone. So an asset is really what you define as valuable. I wouldn't necessarily get carried away with having loads of houses or property or loads of money at this stage. Yes, all that is classed as an asset, but ultimately you will have things, whether it's tangible things that you can touch or intangible things that you can't touch, that you may deem to be valuable, that you want to pass on to someone who you care about. And so you want to have full control over that. So it may not be vast today, but it could be vast tomorrow. It could have some value, who knows? So it's important, don't play it small and think, well, I don't have anything of value, so I don't need to have a will. I think everyone should have an element of control.
Okay. So if you don't have any children, do you still need a will?
As I said, it really just depends on everyone's situation, okay? There's so many different nuances to situations, family situations. Well, let's give you an example. Maybe you're in a relationship with someone and you don't have a child yet, okay? And let's just say you purchased a house together and you passed away. So the wife passed away yesterday. I keep saying wife and husband, but if you're not married, the spouse passes away or partner passes away, and the male partner is still alive, for example. Now, if you didn't have a will, where does that money go? Okay, the government says automatically a percentage of that will go to the living partner, which is perfectly fine. But let's just say there was a house involved, then that partner remarried, okay, and had kids. Would you not want maybe some element of your wealth to go to your family members? Maybe your mum, your dad, your siblings, your nieces, your nephews, people who you cared about. Ultimately, wealth will be transferred to the other partner, and you will have no say in that event at all once you pass away. So it really is, it can get very, very complicated. And ultimately, if you're in a situation where you know you want to have full control, where that transfer of wealth goes, whether now or in the future, then you need to plan for that in advance. There's also things like taxation. Again, it depends on earnings and income and overall wealth that you have. But ultimately, assets are appreciating a lot more. People who own homes, the value of those homes are appreciating a lot more. So parents will have ability maybe to hand down inheritance to their children at some point. And if that child decides not to have a will to protect that wealth and keep it within their family, then that wealth can be transferred to somebody else. And that may not be to the happiness or to the consent of your family. So it is important to plan in advance, without a doubt.
Brilliant. So can wills be amended? Absolutely.
It's important to amend wills, especially when life events take place. So let's say you had a will when you just got married. I don't like talking about divorce, but it happens. Unfortunately, it's very common. But in a divorce, a will needs to be amended, because obviously if you've had plans for that partner that no longer is in your life, then that needs to be amended, else something may happen that you're not going to be happy about. If they remarried, and they have children with somebody else, do you want that wealth to go to the other child or other family members? So you do need to amend your will. If you move home, you need to amend your will. If you get married, you need to have a will. If you had a will just by yourself and you're with a partner, then you need to have a mirror will. So most life events, when they change, you need to factor in possibly a change or amendment of the will itself. Yeah. So it is important to amend a will, especially when life events are changing. moving house, marriage, divorce, having a child. So that those things are all factored in. A good will writer would try and preempt a lot of those future events as much as possible, but some things you cannot necessarily predetermine, like a divorce, for example. So it's just having those things, being aware of those things, because it can render a will invalid in some instances, or cause family members to challenge and cause more conflicts and problems and delay.
Okay, so are there any instances that can make a will invalid?
Yes, it's important to make sure your will's signed. Some people might think they've got a will, they might have bought it from a stationer's or whatever, and it's not been witnessed properly. It could be invalid, as I said, if a life event has taken place and you've not changed it or amended it, it could cause it to be invalid completely. So yeah, it's important to double check those things. It's important, without a doubt.
Okay.
Yeah.
So while doing research for this video, I came across two terms: a living trust and a last will. So what's the difference between the two?
Without getting too technical, literally you can have trusts within a will, and you can have trusts outside of a will. All right. So depending on what you're trying to achieve, and I don't want to border on giving advice on the internet, then there's some instances where a living trust may be required. So effectively, a living trust is where a trust is being put into play whilst the beneficiary is, or any person that you put into trust, a member of the trust, should I say, is still alive. Most trusts in the will only take place in the event of a death, but there may be instances where you need to have a will in the event of when someone's still living as we speak. So that will help with tax planning, inheritance tax planning. Maybe if you've come into a windfall of money and you put it into trust for your children, something to protect them from third parties. All those type of scenarios could be planned for whilst alive or in the event of death. So those are two different types of scenarios.
Brilliant.
Without getting too technical.
And another term I came across was an executor. What is an executor of a will?
So an executor of a will is effectively an administrator, someone who's going to be the one responsible for making sure that your wishes are carried out upon the event of death. Okay, and it's not an easy feat. So we've got to choose very wisely as to who we want to be an executor. A lot of us just think, oh, my mate will do it, it's not a problem. But there is a lot of responsibility, and to the point that especially there's a lot of money involved in distribution of assets to various individuals, parties, paying off of debts, etc. If that's done wrong or even miscalculated, that executor could be in a lot of trouble. So it is wise to have a professional executor take over. But to answer the question specifically, not to get too convoluted, an executor is someone who just carries out the wishes of the deceased, the testator, in the will.
And then finally, you've done great, by the way.
Oh, appreciate that, thank you.
How does someone get a will?
There's lots of ways to get a will, but the best way is to speak with someone who knows what they're talking about. The reason why I'm saying that, because there's so much changes in the law, because there's so many things that sometimes you may not consider yourself without having some type of advice, then speak to someone who knows what they're doing. A professional can give you the right advice, so you are perfectly clear, perfectly confident that you've received the right advice, and that your will cater for the wishes and the desires that you have for your family and loved ones. So a professional will writer, there are solicitors that do it, but they may not be specialists. Okay, so if you actually have a specialist will writer or estate planner in your area, then they will be able to speak to you directly and give you the advice based on the questions and concerns that you have.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So I think this was quite beneficial, actually. I hope you did too. Please remember to post any comments, any questions underneath. Also, please remember to like. Please remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also to share this video with your friends and families. So this is really important information. Finally, thank you to Richard for joining me on Set Up for Success, and thank you for watching, and see you again on the next episode of Set Up for Success.